Hands on, feet on, powered on your mark. On is the start of everything. On is the key to learning. Being on an environment, not just in it. Being on the world, not just of it.
Tarkett understands how important On is.
We work on it every day. On the ground with you, designing flooring experiences to grow on, dream on, and get on with it.
Hello from sunny Arizona today. We're happy to be joining you and welcome again to our presentation. We are excited to be here and to bring you on this journey. We have two tremendous projects to talk about. I call them the bookend projects. And first of all, let me do some introductions of our panel with us today. I'm Dr. Dennis Runyon, Superintendent of the Agua Fria School District. Ernie Molina is the principal of Agua Fria High School, one of the two projects we'll be talking about today, and the focus of today's work. And our wonderful partners from DLR, they are represented by David Schmidt, and he's the K-12 education leader, as you can see there on the screen at this time.
Thanks, Dennis. So we really came here today to talk about Agua Fria High School, but I think that the story really starts back at Canyon View. And Canyon View was a high school that won the MacConnell Award last year, but Canyon View was based upon a set of principles that was developed by the district before we ever started design of that, and that was the original manifestation of that. But this presentation originated out of the questions from last year of, that's great if I have a new school, but what do I do if I have an older school or a school that I'm remodeling? How can I implement some of those ideas at a school like that? So before we go into Mr. Molina's campus at Agua Fria, I'd like to take a step back and review some of the basic ideas of which this design was based.
So the first thing, if you go way back, if you go back 7 to 10 years, we did some innovative things at Verrado High School when it was built. And so we've always thought about things from a very innovative standpoint. We've always tried to be as progressive as possible. So when Canyon View came on board and we had the bond money to build the new high school, one of the principles, well, they're actually the principles you see in front of you, but one of the first guiding principles was, are we here to innovate or replicate? And again, DLR worked with us, and we went through a very extensive process to look at these 5 areas: teaching and learning, community, partnerships, healthy learning environments, and technology. And included in this was months and months of travel and opportunities to look at some of the innovative practices around the country. So what I want to share with you as we developed our guiding principles, this was quite a journey, and it was something that, you know, the foundation wasn't built overnight. So as you enter into some of these things and you want to open your district up to the possibilities of innovation, you have to be careful to make sure that you're setting the table. And I hope that we can show you through this presentation how we went about that.
I think that if you look at the guiding principles, they're fantastic in the sense that they set a groundwork for the direction we want to go. But I think that they're not completely different from where a lot of school districts want to go. I think what really sets Agua Fria Union apart is the 3 bold ideas. And this is really speaking about how we want to implement those guiding principles and how far we want to take them, and being, as Dennis said, be innovators, not replicators. And so some of those ideas, a catalyst for change, manifested itself in terms of innovation, small learning communities, and the idea that this was a learning marketplace, that learning was on display everywhere, and that it was available to all students, and there was no other kids. It was all of us together. The idea of spatial diversity was super, super important. The idea that learning happens in different modes and methods, and that the ideas of the past are not necessarily valid anymore, that teachers are a guide rather than someone who delivers knowledge. And that to do that and to make learning relevant, you needed access to different types of space and different types of learning modes. I think as we talked about, community access was super important as well. the idea that the community, this is a community school, but also the community and the partners in their community make learning relevant for our students. And then the idea of student ownership, that we were looking at democratizing the space such that it became everybody's space, not owned by one singular teacher, and the teachers go to them. The idea that the students own the space and the teachers come to the students. And so one of the things that allowed that to happen was a rather robust teacher workroom. And this is, you can see, not really a workroom. And I wish I had some photographs of this actually in use with some teachers and when it's all populated now that they're actually using it. But each of the small learning communities had a space for about 16 teachers where they could have a desk, they could keep their stuff, they could put up pictures of their kids. They had a phone room to be used. They had a little bathroom all their own. They had a kitchenette, and right behind me, this photograph is actually sitting in a little diner area, and that this is where the teachers hang out. And so it not only gave them the area where they could collaborate, but it gave them a home base and a place to keep their stuff. And when they go to class, they go to the space that they need to deliver the education in the mode that they think is appropriate for that day. So the other concept was the learning marketplace, and the idea that learning was on display. And so this is the space we call the Agora at Canyon View. And as you can see, that this is the main circulation space on there, and that every space basically has a path onto that learning marketplace. And the idea that the space on the left, as you can see, the last word there, Raider, that's Accelerator, is a space that was that teacher development space and that community space. It's really the center of the campus. And so that is a space that's available to everyone, even people outside the campus. And so you have some ideas of what we looked at and where we started with this, but we really wanted to concentrate today on Mr. Molina's campus, Agua Fria High School, the original campus in the Agua Fria Union High School District.
Thank you, David. As you can see, first of all, again, my name is Ernie Molina. I'm the principal. I have the joy of serving as the principal of Agua Fria High School. And as you can see, all the ideas that we've seen thus far are terrific and exciting. They're really exhilarating. Nonetheless, where our school stood was a rather old campus. But one of the really neat things about this snapshot here is, a biology teacher right in the midst of her students, really engaging with them. And so this is kind of where we began our journey at Agua Fria. And one of the pieces that we felt really strongly about was the culture of Agua Fria. We are an original community school. The students, we have third and sometimes as much as fourth generation Agua Fria students, very, very proud that their grandparents attended Agua Fria High School. And so we dare not lose that enthusiasm in the pursuit of the shiny objects.
I think that's a great point, Ernie, because I think Dennis had told me at one point that he said if I could can or bottle the culture at Agua Fria and deliver it to every campus, I would do that. And it points to the fact that you can take a set of ideas about teaching and learning and you can put them into different campuses, but that every campus has its own culture, and therefore they might manifest themselves slightly differently in the way that you do the design.
And one of the reasons I call it the bookend schools is that you have that tradition, that community, that culture with our cornerstone at Ernie's school in Agua Fria. And then at Canyon View, you had the new build, which was kind of an open slate and an open opportunity to develop that culture. So as we go through and we look at this and you adapt it to that pre-existing campus, you'll see a very unique set of bookends and different philosophies for the architectural and design for the learning spaces.
Yeah, so this was an example of really that exploration back in 2016 before Canyon View, and then doing it again to really observe how the day in the life of a student looks different at Mr. Molina's campus at Agua Fria later on.
So one of the pieces here in terms of this piece here is we try to identify what are the essential components of learning today. And one of the pieces we felt really strongly about not just at our campus, but across our district, was creating a high level of engagement for students. You know, the idea of students owning their own learning, being safe to take the risks, you know, in their own discovery and in their own journey, and having the support of their friends and colleagues and teachers all around them. And so that was a real important part in our taking that next step. And so this slide here, in terms of developing the future planning, it's a little difficult to see, you know, the elements of those really high pillars of 40% and 42%. But one of the things they identified were these small groups, and identifying, you know, those learning opportunities for small groups. And one of the things that really resonated with us, if you're familiar with the Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, it's the notion of you know, supporting learners just beyond their ability with a group of like-minded learners around them, and the support of a caring teacher that was guiding them. You know, 20 years ago, we were talking about being the guide on the side, not the sage on the stage. And that used to be the buzzword in education. And this really is another step forward in that process, where we have really begun being that coach and that mentor and that colleague, you know, with one another. And then for our students, being that mentor for them as they support one another in their own journey. So this is one of the pieces that was really resounding as we started getting to that next page of what new buildings and new structures would look like for us.
And obviously, from a designer standpoint, that has a lot of implications in terms of the programming that we do and the spaces that we need to support the ideas that Mr. Molina is pushing.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, you know, as we went forward, again, reiterating, you know, at this point, we had resolved that, all right, we have to move forward. We cannot be 65 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. Nonetheless, we also didn't want to run off and lose what we had. And that's why, you know, we included this snapshot here, because this is really just a normal kind of day, you know, a Friday. Fridays are read out days, and this is what it looks like on a day for our students. And you can see they enjoy the fellowship of one another. So we wanted to retain that component, that piece very much.
Thanks, Ernie. So I'm going to start with kind of looking at the campus of where it is now, because I think that it's super important to understand the bones that we're working with. What's different, obviously, when we started Canyon View, it was a blank sheet of paper and we could do whatever we wanted within the context of a big site. This campus is not a tear down, as we've seen a lot in Arizona recently, where they bulldoze an entire site and just start over. This campus was a selective demolition, a renovation, additions, and little pieces here and there to bring this campus and try to, when we're done, create something that was completely new, but within the context of an existing campus. And so we don't have the opportunity to start from a fresh sheet of paper. And so it's super important to understand where we start from. And if you look at this campus way back in 1957 in the original buildings, you can see the idea of a quad starting to form here. It hasn't really come to fruition yet, but a little bit later, you can see how this campus has matured, and it's really become a cohesive campus that's held together by this central area that we've named the Esplanade. It may take on a different name later as we go into design, but it was really, that's the center of the campus, and it's activated by that. But as you can see, as we start to grow, campus gets a little bigger, and by this point in time now, there's been another ring of buildings added on around it. The space off to the right-hand side there that looks kind of deserty, Mr. Molina and his staff refer to that as the J Desert by building J, because it's really just a big gravel pit that students walk through. There's a lot of little sub-courtyards that are very difficult to really keep track of, that there's students all over the place, and so it's difficult to monitor where they are. And so one of the ideas was, how do we actually begin to make the space feel like it's where the space we call home at Agua Fria. And so really looking at not only that, but some other components. Where are the amenities? The what do we go to get food? Where do we go to check out books? Where are the spaces where we can congregate? Where our special classrooms occur? Where do kids just naturally hang out? And what can we draw from those in terms of the type of spaces that they are that the students like?
As David just mentioned, in terms of the historical perspective of the school, this journey has taken us through an extensive planning process. And every time we look at the campus, whether it's the Canyon View campus or the renovations or the remodels here at Agua Fria, we constantly have two factors. We have the development of the spaces for teachers for learning and teaching. And we also have the use of it for multiple groups, which includes students, community, and other factors. And so we went through a very intensive process to think through all of the different ways and all of the different design scope for the utilization of these spaces. And again, I share with you today the importance of this because those factors, whether it's professional development, making the schools look as attractive as possible to teachers that want to work there, want to teach there, want to engage there, or if it's something that the students can be proud of and feel like that they have ownership, as Ernie said, those are the things that we constantly use to drive our discussions.
And so on this this phase here, I love this this portion of our journey. Looking back on this portion, it really reminds me of an old Johnny Cash song, "One Piece at a Time," where he sneaks a Cadillac out of a factory over the matter of 30 some odd years. And when you looked at our campus at that point where we really started digging in, you know, we had everything from buildings that were as new as just a few years old, and they had new alarm systems and the like, and then we had portables on the campus. And so beginning, you know, to launch from that place into a new and exciting tomorrow, to get here and to begin to look at future phases and the potential notion of bridging to the future and bridging to other buildings was really energizing and exciting for us. This is where all the creative juices started really producing excellent products for us.
And I should mention, this is a product of that planning, but we call it a master plan. But the master plan, in the sense of some districts, it's looking at what buildings you have, how much space you have, really setting kind of educational specifications. This master plan was really talking about the big ideas in terms of a campus, of when we move forward, what are the things we want to accomplish, not getting down to the specifics of we need this many thousand square feet and we need this type of space. This is a big picture of how to reactivate the campus, and that's what you're seeing here.
And again, this is more of that planning, the process that we went through. What David showed you a minute ago was the future phases, and Ernie described to you some of that methodology as we plan forward. Remember, this is over 2 separate bonds that we've approved. So phase 1 is the one now that we can show you examples of and how that turned out. Phase 2, or the future bond, was just passed, and we are still in the planning stages for that. But again, it's so unique because we had to be seamless over the course of 2 different bond scopes. We had to be seamless in terms of the overall campus with pre-existing conditions. That's probably the wrong term to use right now with the election, but that campus had a lot of work that needed to be done. I think everybody agrees with that. But again, it's been a very exciting process. And in a minute, when we get into the pictures here, you're going to see that how the spaces are super pliable and how the students can develop some of the ways that these are utilized along with the teachers.
What we're showing here in phase 1 was answering the question of what do you do now? And so Dennis was talking about the previous bond. And so we started this off with just a few $1 million that we had left over from the previous bond. And what can we do that's going to show, going to make change on the campus? It's going to set the seed of something for the future, but it also solves some immediate needs on the campus. And so that manifested itself in, let's take 2 of the buildings, which we believe I identified on the master plan as remaining. Well, obviously they will remain. And how can we remodel the interior of those to implement some of those ideas about spaces that support teaching and learning in the style that Agua Fria Union foresaw, but also another little component which I'll touch on at the beginnings here. And so you can see that here, those two existing buildings, really taking those and gutting them. And so the first one, we really, part of that master plan began to set up zones of influence. And so we have kind of a social studies zone and a general academics. We have science, we have athletics, we have performance and drama. This is one of those general curriculum areas, and beginning to look at what science and social, I'm sorry, not science, but social studies and government classes, and this idea that there's a forum in the middle where everybody comes together. There's some spaces on the in those red areas where the small groups can learn. We talked about small groups. But then another classroom, and again, this is within the context of existing buildings. And so we're not doing much to the outside of them, but really taking the inside and completely gutting the buildings and starting over. This is the other building on the other end of campus, which is looking at the science wing and how do you put labs into those spaces, and can science classrooms, if we all have individual labs that we can go to because they're pliable and teachers can share them, then can a science classroom actually be a very open and visually open as well as actually open space, because it doesn't need to have the fume hoods and those things. And then can science really be one of those things where learning is on display? But the last piece was the component which we had to solve some real needs, and actually we looked at those as opportunities as well.
Correct, David, thank you. And that brings us to the cafe, the Owl Cafe. And, you know, as was mentioned, we had real issues and capacity issues, such as, you know, how do we feed, you know, 1,800 students in 30 minutes and get them through really what ended up being about 7 to 8 lines of meal delivery. And so this feature here is a satellite serving station where we have a warming kitchen and we serve everything that we would serve in our snack bar in a kind of a satellite location. But the other effect that it provided was, again, to provide an area for congregating and collaborating. Natural things that brought students together, such as chargers, believe it or not. And so they would sit there and you know, sit there on the benches with their meals in hand and having discussions, having their phones plugged in or their Chromebooks plugged in. There were some other charging stations on the seats that were provided as well. But the other impact of this was to move the kind of the center of the campus, the center of the socializing, to more towards the center of the Innovation Center, which is upstairs from this station here. So that's the Owl Cafe that you're examining right there on this slide. And then this is a typical classroom prior to us, you know, breaking ground. I guess it's not breaking ground, but breaking walls maybe. You know, this is what it looked like. And once upon a time, we thought computers were really important. So we put power against the wall and we put computers in the room. And so obviously now we're a one-to-one district. So every one of our students has a Chromebook. So this is what the classroom looked like just a couple of years ago. And you can see a product that we are extremely proud of today. One of the things I want to mention about this segment here, we initially had planned to do our ribbon cutting in the cafe, and we looked at the weather outside, and we ended up opting to move into the science wing, this flex space here. And on the poster board towards the back and towards the right of the slide you're observing, you can see a heart. And the name of this room, our department chair, our science department chair, gave it the name El Corazón. And so it is the heart of the entire science wing. And so that's one of the really neat features of this space. And you'll be able to see in a little bit, a couple more slides, the ways that we're using this room for not just our science classes, but predominantly our science courses, for breakouts, for students to go in and collaborate and to have meetings. So we're really excited about this opportunity and for this event.
What did you call it, Ernie?
It's the heart. In Spanish, it's el corazón. Yep. And so this is a snapshot out of El Corazón from the opposite side. And this is a teacher leading a small breakout group. This is an after-school meeting that's going on here of his students. I believe I'm looking at our STEM teacher. This right here would have been last spring, probably planning for our STEM Con in the spring. So that was one of the ways, this room was utilized as a flexible space. And so we brought our students in. No teacher had to give up their space. You can see through the windows of that back room. The teacher is still working in her back room back there. So nobody had to give up their space for this club to come together, these young scientists to come together and begin to do some work after school.
Just to point out one thing on this, you'll notice that what we're dealing with in some of these existing buildings is very low ceilings, and actually this building actually has a higher roof than the other one, and so we took out the ceilings. This is actually the existing ductwork. We just painted over it and tried to bring in some acoustical material in the form of the light fixtures as well as some tectum to mitigate sound. But the volume of the space was opened up considerably. It has a very different feel than it did originally, just by taking those ceilings out.
Absolutely. And David, if I may include one more thing on these slides, both the previous and on this one, the choice in furniture. When you examine the different places that the students are sitting, giving students the choice of furniture has proven to be one of the things that's really neat for us. From the higher desktops, each of our desktops, most of them have a gloss top that all of our students use as a whiteboard. And so to facilitate checking for understanding, a teacher can walk around, peer groups can look at each other's work right there on their high tops, but also for any of you educators out there that were anything like me, it's so difficult to do math sitting down. And so the ability to stand up and be working at a standing height is really energizing. For the record, I actually am at my standing desk right now. But giving choice to the students is something that has been really powerful for us.
And you can see this is in the other building now where the ceilings are much lower. And so again, by actually opening up that space and in this case, kind of pulling the ductwork out of the picture into the sides, we were able to get that volume that we wanted.
This one features the openness of the idea behind the fact that teaching and learning is transparent. One of the outcomes that's very interesting, we learned both at Canyon View and in this project, is that when you have a substitute now, the teachers can see that substitute and they can actually provide assistance more readily, and there's more collaboration. The other thing, Ernie, I don't know if you've experienced this yet, but at Canyon View, we found when guests came that the students were actually coming up and leading the tours and engaging about the workspaces and how they utilize the spaces. So the idea behind some of this openness is very favorable. If you go all the way back to the 70s, remember there was for those of you that are of age, there was a movement with some more open concepts. But I think this is actually a time where that's maturing and it's actually being utilized. We also looked at a number of corporations and a number of workspaces within those corporations. And so these spaces lend themselves to students being involved in spaces that they'll see both at the university and in their professional work life. So again, it's a very vibrant model and a very open and colorful opportunity.
This photo doesn't have all the kids in it because it's obviously after school, but I think it demonstrates some of the availability of different spaces. In the center rear, you can see a small group area that's off to the side. You can see a classroom that's kind of a little bit more isolated, but still visually connected. On the right, you can see a classroom that has the glazed operable walls closed at the moment, but those can open up. That room and the room next to it can open up into the space that the photo is being taken from right now. And then on the left in the background, you can see through those glass doors is actually a very much a specialty space within that. And so those spaces, like in this case, the STEM lab, are integrated into the learning areas. They're not something that you go to on 1 week back on the North 40 of the campus. And we already saw that. I'm going to skip through this one. here is the one I intended to show you. So this is that lab we just talked about, that STEM lab. And so this is looking back through those doors on the right into the space where the previous photograph was taken. But you can see that low ceiling, but how we managed to incorporate some versatile things within there.
David, was that a makerspace? Was that part of the? That's kind of the idea that this is a multi-use area that pretty much any subject area could access. Is that correct?
Yes. And I think the other important part of that, so this is that same room again, but showing how it opens up. And so the garage door is open right now. And so in this phase of the development of this, we did not have the ability to do anything with the outside space yet. But you know, that was a very important part of this project, looking at the completion of the master plan, is how that esplanade space in the center is revitalized. And one of those components is that it builds on that marketplace for learning. And so the idea of this makerspace or STEM lab and some of these shared use spaces all have a frontage onto that esplanade. And so in this case, you can see it in these open. What's interesting, so this is a 1957 building you're looking at right now. You can see the 1991 glass block addition on the left, but taking this 8-foot on center steel frame of a building and managing to open it up and make it into something completely different on the inside as well as connected to the outside, I think is a definite possibility, and you can see it on display right here.
And so
the last place, and I'm going to let Ernie talk about this space, but this is looking at that Owl Cafe space again, and a space that was very underutilized on the campus and what it looked like before.
Thank you, David. So the Owl Cafe, you know, the view you're observing right now is looking south from the north side of the Owl Cafe. And exactly that, pretty much that same view. And you can see how energizing that is. That was, I believe, taken on a nice brisk morning last year. And you can see how just exciting and vibrant that looks, and very inviting for our students. We now use the Owl Cafe for student meetings, for coaches of the month, celebrations, coaches meetings, athlete of the month. We have breakout groups for our teachers. We have year 1, year 2 teachers will be in there with the instructional coach. All kinds of opportunities for us to utilize that space. And then we also utilize it, of course, for lunch and breakfast as well for our students. It's a place where our students love to gather. They love to sit together and kind of congregate and hang out. And so it also is a bridge and a tie right into one of our exciting spaces, which is the library, and it ties right into the library from inside and outside of the Owl Cafe.
So this is one of those spaces that we alluded to at the beginning that was solving a very immediate need on the campus, but really re-examined and looking at it in terms of an opportunity to start to, even though it was not planned originally to do this in the first phase, looking at it as an opportunity to start to induce that the new campus onto Ernie's wonderful existing campus. And there's a view of that same space from the outside. You can see the existing building. This is an existing building around it, and then this area through the glass on the bottom there was the addition into that dark area that was unused underneath the existing library there. And you can see those garage doors there. They're in this case closed, but on any nice morning, Ernie opens those up and this becomes a bagel bar and whatever else needs to happen in there.
This particular picture I requested, again, this is a shout out to the work we did with DLR and our architects. Like David said, the upstairs there in the library is pre-existing. Back when they did the structure, it had kind of, I call it a boat motif, but it had this kind of vessel-like appearance. And this is the stairs going up to that from outside the cafe. And I'm just struck by what you can do with the architecture when you blend the two together and you take what was literally a dead space and literally an unused space, as Ernie said, and you bring it alive and you bring in the light and the vibrancy and the color. But this is just a simple example of taking something, and it's not overtly expensive, but it really brings the place to life. And again, kudos to our partners for their creative work there.
So as Dennis mentioned, everything below the upper level there, with the exception of the actual stair itself, is the addition of the Owl Cafe. And there's just a view of the interior of that space, and you can see the 4 serving windows on the far left there. Some of the variety of seating in there, and how this really can become not just a space that serves bagels in the morning or serves lunch at lunchtime, but something that student government uses after school, that teachers use for teacher meetings. That's become a popular club space as well.
One of the really exciting things about the cafe is its name actually was the idea, it was the brainchild of really our MVP. She is our Mrs. Awafria. She was a student at Awafria. She came back and taught at Awafria. She now serves as an assistant principal. And, you know, Stephanie was the one that kind of drew up the cafe, you know, expressed that way with capital A and F, because, you know, our kind of logo is real dear to us. So having that integrated in this was really special to all of us. You know, you can see our journey to, you know, use spaces that we already had and keep the culture that we saw on the faces of our students. We define culture, we use the cognitive definition of culture, a total way of life unique to a people. And when you think about our students at Awafria, it's the experience, it's them coming together. And that is something that is very special about, you know, the heartbeat of Awafria High School. It's our students and how they interact together, and how our faculty goes out of their way to create those interactions and those to facilitate those small group meetings. And so that's kind of our full journey thus far.
Ernie, how do you say heartbeat in Spanish?
I actually don't know heartbeat. I will check on that one.
Okay, Corazon. And so looking back at this, the phases of how we developed this, you saw just a little piece of 2 of those buildings on the campus that are shown to stay. But that was really just scratching the surface of where this master plan was going. And so what's the next phase? Dennis mentioned, Dr. Runyon mentioned that they managed to pass through their voter support a bond last November, right about this next week, and 51 weeks ago, and we're able to progress to the next stage. And so we're looking at now how we implement the next continuing effort in the renovation of this campus, and what does that begin to look like. And so it was very interesting that in kicking that off, we were using this software, cloud-based software, where we can all share our ideas and our pictures, and we can work interactively with everybody online at the same time. And we put together a lot of ideas, and a lot of these ideas we're starting to look at where are we going now with this COVID environment, and is this something that's a passing fad, and we're going to go back and say, hey, remember back in 2020? Or are we going to look back and say, hey, remember before 2020 how we used to do it this way? And so we think that it's probably somewhere in between. And so how does that affect the spaces that we need at a high school? And so with that in mind, we looked at what our path forward might look like.
In this part right here, in terms of path forward, we spoke earlier about bridges, and you saw that feature come through that experience from, you know, 1957 through the ages, where we had the campus that looked like the Cadillac Johnny Cash sang about. And then we went into that phase where we started identifying what were the things that were essential to us on our campus. And into our path forward, we began talking about bridges. And that was a consistent theme as we kept talking about bridges, or talking about renovating the campus and improving the campus. So bridges across the campus, bridges from one side to the other, bridges of community, bridges, you know, places to eat, bridges from north to south and east to west. And one of the other points we identified was the idea of having bridges beyond just to physical locations, bridges to the community. How can we integrate the community and bring the community back into Alfreda High School? Bridges to the future. How can we reach out to our future generations, both our incoming freshmen, go down to our feeder schools, and even down to the little squirts down in, kindergarten. Bridges to the future and bridges to different parts of the day even. And so that's what's really exciting about where we are right now is we have learned from this journey, and it would be, very important to state right now that, lest you think that I have always been on this bandwagon, I will assure you, and David would attest to this, at many points I was being drug along kicking and streaming, because what I used to always say was innovation is what our teachers do in the classroom. To be sure, that's correct. Nonetheless, we have identified that creating spaces that can cultivate that expression and cultivate those conversations is absolutely meaningful. They're significant, they're important, and it is the way many of our students learn today. And so in our present kind of phase, as we plan for tomorrow and plan to integrate more of these spaces and more construction ideas, we're looking at other kinds of bridges now. We're looking at bridges to, as I said, the community, and bridges to different parts of the day. We dream about Alfreda after dark and what that might look like for us to extend our classrooms, outside of the normal school day structure that we have found through this pandemic doesn't work for everyone. And we've also identified that a hybrid or online learning experience does work for some students in some situations. And so our ability to integrate that into the secondary experience for our students is one of the essential pieces that we see going forward. And so that brings us to this, the idea of, growing forward and yet holding on to what we have and trying to balance both of those pieces. And to that end, where we are now is the idea of this passport to the future. And what do we have to punch in that passport? For some of our students, they're going to have CTE coursework, and some of them will have AP coursework. Some of them will have, a myriad of both options and many options. Some of our musicians will have, a band all 4 years, but they might want to have a lot of AP coursework as well. So it's a matter of creating a passport for our student, individualizing that journey for our students, and making them really prepared for the post-secondary world of tomorrow.
And so as we move forward, the question is, we would always, as every school district would love under every bond, was to have more money than we do. And so the question is, how do you make the best impact with the amount of money that we have? And how do you set yourself up for the future? Maybe in the next bond, is there a little nugget that's left out there that maybe that tops this off? And I think that as you look at old campuses, the director of operations for the district said, well, I'm finding that on our older campuses, you're never really done, because once you finish one thing, then something else begins to look old, and the parents begin to realize that we could do better elsewhere. And so it's in a constant state of motion. I think the master plan has set us up well. So the question now was this phase and the money that we have, what do we do? And we talked about that bridge, both physically and metaphorically. The question, can we activate that courtyard, and can we build that bridge without actually physically connecting ourselves with a span over the top? And how might that start to look? Again, we talked about the idea of blurring lines inside and outside the marketplace, and what this Esplanade can really do to invigorate that. In this case, again, the way the students circulate is an important part of that. And so where you put things like stairs, where you place individual key elements within the campus, an innovation center, for example, is super important, not just in terms of drawing people to that part of the campus, but making things readily available, because if they're not readily available, they won't get used. So things that we used to go shove behind closed doors on the edge of campus because they weren't classrooms, we're now finding that those have reason to be right in the middle of campus. The other way we're looking at this, and this is there's kind of two ways to look at this. It was this one, and we call this the passport. And this is, as Ernie mentioned, the path forward. This is really looking at, instead of yes and, in fact, which is to say we have some of what we had some of what we got in the last phase and a little bit of the future stuff together. This is really looking at a completely different idea of campus and taking the negative space and making it the stuff now, and that you are now the connective tissue in between those buildings. And so experientially, this is a completely different way of understanding your school. It's not necessarily about the marketplace as an exterior mall any longer. It's about the marketplace being a connector of all these little squishy spaces, sticky spaces, innovative spaces, and spaces that are not traditional learning environments in the center, linking together the more traditional learning environments that we looked at originally and in phase one. And so this is where we're exploring that may be reinventing. And I believe that, you know, the path based on today's meeting where we're going might be a little bit in between both of these ideas, and incorporate some ideas of both of them. And this is to say that not that the building might actually be a fractile dome, but that the idea that the building takes on a very amorphous shape, and it's more about an experiential relationship to learning spaces rather than a diagrammatic planning one. So that that concludes where what we've got for you today. Dennis, I'd like to ask you a question in a moment about how you thought the district was ready to jump off on this journey, or where you might give advice for people to take that in the future. But I'll leave it with I hear some contact information that'll be on the final slide, and you're welcome to reach out to Dennis or myself. We're kind of trying to spare Ernie the pain, if you will. But we'd love to converse with you if you're a district that's looking at those things in the future. Dennis, do you have any thoughts?
Well, yeah, just in closing, again, I want to express my appreciation to everyone. Thank you, David. Thank you, Ernie. Thank you for those of you joining us today, and all of the professionals out there and the work that you do. The two big takeaways from this and the innovative side, one is to be open to the opportunity and the flexibility. And Ernie shared it so well, his last story there when he talked about dragging and screaming, and just his cycle and experience is a perfect example to me to watch that journey that he went through. And it just reinforces what I've learned as well. So to be open to that and be open to the idea of innovation and not replication, but to truly be willing to experiment. The second thing is the engagement of teachers and students. They are the future. They are what this is all about. And they do bring a lot of value to this, both professionally as teachers and innovatively as students, with the creativity of their thinking and the processing of the work. And again, you get the right partner, the right mix, and you have a great recipe. That's what I have to say. And again, we'll open it up to questions.